spent a lot of time, obviously, in Navy SEAL training, and you learnt a heap of different skills when you did that. Can you take us through the skills that you learned that you feel could help people with their everyday life?
Yeah, so let me give you a little background on Navy SEAL training. It takes place in Coronado, California, which is in the city of San Diego. And it is 6 months long. It's broken down into three phases. The first phase is about 10 weeks long, and it is really the hardest of all the phases. It's a selection phase. It's where the instructors are really trying to weed out those, weak of mind and body. The second phase, while the harassment and the physical training still continues, you learn how to dive, how to scuba dive, and you learn special rigs that we use as Navy frogmen. And then the third phase of training, another 10 weeks long, is about land warfare. So you have to learn to shoot, move, and communicate. Remember the acronym SEAL, and it is an acronym, stands for sea, air, and land. So you've got to be good in the water, you have to be a good skydiver, and then you have to be good on the land. So, when I went through SEAL training in 1977, all of my instructors were former Vietnam veterans, or they were Vietnam veterans. And these guys were pretty tough. And they wanted to make sure that everybody, going through SEAL training was going to kind of meet a standard of toughness and a standard of teamwork that they expected if you were going to be serving with them. But very early on in SEAL training, and in fact, the very first thing you did every morning in SEAL training was you had an inspection. And the class I was in, we had 110 guys when we started. And the class I was in, we lived in a 3-story barracks, and the officers lived on the third floor. And every morning, the instructors would come in, and they would inspect your room initially just to make sure the room was clean. Then they'd do a uniform inspection, and you'd have to come to attention, and they would check your hat, and they would make sure your uniform was perfectly starched, that your brass belt buckle was shining, that your shoes were spit shined, and then they would inspect your bed. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not sure I get it. I mean, I come to Navy SEAL training to be this battle hardened Navy SEAL, and now they've got me, learning to make my bed every morning. Well, as the months went on, and every morning you had to make your bed, and every morning it was inspected. Finally, I got up the courage to ask one of these crusty old, senior chief petty officers, Navy SEAL, why do we go to so much trouble to make our bed? And he said, well, there's a couple of reasons. He said, one, if you start your day with a task completed and you do it well, it kind of inspires you to do another task and another and another. And he says, the other thing is, it's about the little things in life. If you can't even make your bed to exacting standards, how can we ever trust you to lead a complex SEAL mission? Learn to do the little things right, and you'll learn to do the big things right. But later on in my career, the bed took on even a different meaning. And over the course of the next 30 years, I made my bed every day on ships, on submarines, on shore duty. But when the war, in Iraq and Afghanistan unfolded, I spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, I lived in what we referred to as a B hut. It was made by the Navy CBs, construction battalions. It was just a plywood room, basically. And I was a 3-star admiral. I was pretty senior, and I was living in a plywood room. And the only thing in that room was a bed, a rack, as we say in the Navy. And every morning I would get up, I'd go do my physical training, I'd come back, and I would make that bed. Because I knew when I walked out that door, that plywood door, into this kind of combat zone, that life was going to be very, very challenging. Unfortunately, in combat, young soldiers die, civilians are inadvertently killed, somebody is yelling at you about something. The generals are yelling at you, the admirals are yelling at you, presidents are yelling at you, prime ministers are yelling at you. People get upset. And my days were long. Sometimes they were 20 hours long, sometimes you'd go days. But when I came back into that room, that bed was made. And as all the chaos and crisis kind of revolved around me, the bed was something I controlled. And I realized that was also an important part of my life. It wasn't just starting your day right. It wasn't just understanding how important the little things were. Having the bed gave me some control of my life. And that was very important to me, again, in a combat zone.